Hello, this is a quick video on the principle of comparative advantage, which is something that is really nice to know about anyway, but you actually need to know about it for the globalization section of Unit 4 Economics A2 level. So what is the principle? The official definition you'll get in the textbook is that comparative advantage exists when a country has a lower opportunity cost of producing a good or service than another country. So if each country produces the goods for which it has the greatest comparative advantage overall, whilst importing other goods, overall consumption will increase. And in fact, overall production will increase as well, and we'll see this in an example later on. Here are some factors which determine comparative advantage. I'm sure there are more, but these are my top three, really. Quality of factors of production, which sort of interlinks with the investment one. Obviously, if you invest more, chances are you can have a higher quality of labour, so if you've been investing in education and training, and then capital if you've invested in sort of research and development of new machinery and stuff. If you've got a higher quality of factors of production, your productivity is going to be higher. Higher productivity means that you can produce more in the same period of time, which means that your average costs are going to be lower. So say we've got two countries which are both producing textbooks. We've got Margaret in Spain, not a very Spanish name, but you know. She's not a very high quality factor of production, so she can only produce 3 textbooks an hour. It's not a very good job there, Margaret. In England, we have got Mike, who is well on it. He can produce 3 textbooks in just half an hour. So let's say that Margaret and Mike are representative of all of the workers in their respective countries. Obviously, for the world economy, it's going to be much more efficient for England to produce all of the textbooks. England has a comparative advantage in the production of textbooks because it can produce the same number of textbooks in a shorter period of time. We've now got a demonstration of the principle of comparative advantage in action, which hopefully is going to help to really demonstrate the power of this principle to you. This example is very similar to the one that Ricardo, who came up with a theory of comparative advantage, would give to you, but I thought I'd jazz it up a bit, so I changed Portugal to Australia and changed the goods to hairbrushes and footballs. I believe it was wine and cloth in the original example, and I also changed some of the numbers to make it easier, because it's simpler numbers these are. This is basically a very, very simplified example of a much more complex world situation. So we've only got 2 countries here, England and Australia, and they're only producing 2 goods, hairbrushes and footballs. If we had an autarkial situation where there's no trade, England would spend a total of 250 hours to get 1 unit of hairbrushes and footballs, whilst Australia would spend 150 hours to get 1 unit of hairbrush and footballs. So now we're going to jazz the situation up a bit, and we've now got free trade, so the countries are going to trade between themselves. Each of them is going to specialise in the good which they can produce most efficiently out of the 2. So England is going to produce hairbrushes. It's still going to spend 250 hours, but it's going to produce 2.5 units of hairbrushes. Previously, England would spend 250 hours, with Australia spending 150 hours, and between them, they would only get 2 units of hairbrushes. Now, between them they get 2.5 units of hairbrushes, provided they sort of trade between them and stuff, whereas Australia will still spend 150 hours, but it will get 2.5 units of footballs. So between them they've produced 2.5 units of hairbrushes and 2.5 units of footballs, rather than 2 units of hairbrushes and 2 units of footballs, and that's in the same time. So provided that they do trade, it is beneficial for both countries to specialise in one of the 2. It's important to note that we are making some assumptions here, but we're going to come on to that later. We're now going to apply the principle of comparative advantage to the labour market, and this is actually an extract from Free to Choose, and this is the place where I first learned about the principle of comparative advantage, and I thought it just made it so simple and just beautiful. The beautiful was something of an exaggeration there. Should a lawyer who can type twice as fast as his secretary fire the secretary and do his own typing? If the lawyer is twice as good a typist, but 5 times as good a lawyer as his secretary, both he and the secretary are better off if he practices law and the secretary types letters. I just think that's a really good summary of the principle, because it essentially says if each person practices what they are comparatively best at, or each country produces what they're comparatively best at producing, everyone is better off. Also, that is a great book about capitalism, so if you've got the time to read it, I'd definitely advise reading it. Another great book by him is Capitalism and Freedom. It's very interesting, but totally off topic, so I'm going to stop talking about it. We're now going to look at some realities of the principle. Obviously, there's quite a few unrealistic assumptions being made. Ricardo assumes that there is free trade, and the reality dictates that there is lots of protectionism around, particularly in goods and services which countries believe have strategic value. So it means they're very important to the country. So maybe Australia is far better than us at producing guns, but there's no point us relying on Australia to send us guns, because if we get into a war with Australia, they're not going to send us guns, and if we've been just importing guns from them for so long, we're not going to have all the stuff we need, all the factories, the capital, the trained labour to produce guns. So whilst it may be true that Australia has comparative advantage in gun producing, it does not follow through that it is most beneficial for Britain in the long run to import guns from Australia. Another reality of the principle of comparative advantage is that it could lead to wasted output due to time lags. Say Australia is better at producing toy cars than us, and gradually we see, they have got this massive comparative advantage and we stop producing it. We're going to have lots of empty factories, we're going to have lots of people trained to produce toy cars that now are unable to find work. So we've got unemployed people and unemployed factors of production, and obviously this is wastage and it's irrecoverable. If people have been unemployed for even a month, the output they could have produced in that month is wasted. We can never get it back. It's important to note that comparative advantages change over time. They don't stay the same. So maybe in the 1800s we were amazing at producing lace. Nowadays we haven't got that comparative advantage over other countries. So it's just something good to note that it does fluctuate. And finally, transport costs. Evidently, England trading with Australia, maybe it's cheaper to produce the stuff, we can do it in less time, but think about the amount of time it takes to transport things, the amount of money, the cost to transport stuff, the fuel. Also think of costs beyond monetary costs. We have so many massive negative externalities associated with long distance transportation. So maybe Australia does have a comparative advantage in the production of footballs, but once you've added all the stuff like the cost of transporting it all the way from Australia to England, add the negative externalities associated, there's going to be so much pollution in that transportation. Is it really better for the economies, the countries, the environment, for everybody, if we import footballs from Australia? These are just a few thoughts, but it's definitely something to consider writing about. If you're writing an essay on this, make sure you do write, there are some realities of the principle. Maybe reality doesn't quite follow the principle that Ricardo came up with. Woo! So that's the end of my video on comparative advantage. Hopefully it's helped and it's alright. I haven't made a video in quite a long time. So, just have a lovely day. Goodbye.